anemia is a very important part of your theory, as well as you can get a case also in the exam, a short case kind of thing. So, can you all hear me? Could you please say yes if I'm audible so that I can start my lecture? So anemia is a very, very important part, as India is as a country where anemia is very, very common. Okay, so compared to the Western world, if you see, so WHO data has shown that in India only, in Asian countries, basically, this is a data which is being taken in from the Asian country. This is from the worldwide, but in Asia only around they say 70 to 80% prevalence of anemia is there. And as per the data in 2016, WHO has found out that around 40% of the world pregnant women are anemic. So it's a matter of concern because anemia is preventable. So how it can be prevented and what are the causes of anemia and why we should focus on anemia is that is what we are concerned for. Okay, and especially in pregnancy because anemia is a condition which it gets exaggerated, which gets worsened during pregnancy. Okay, so what is the definition of anemia? If you see that Center for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC) guidelines say that they have compared the iron supplementary population and list. They have found out that certain kind of cutoff criteria they have defined as of hemoglobin as well as a hematocrit percentage. And if the hemoglobin is less than 11 gram per cent and hematocrit of less than 33% in the first trimester and 10.5 gram per cent, 32% in the second trimester, and again if it is less than 11 gram per cent, 33% in the third trimester, that is how we define anemia. So why does this occur? Why there is the anemia gets worsened during pregnancy? Because the physiological changes which occur in pregnancy, the cardiac output increases by about 40% during pregnancy, and if we see the plasma volume increase by 50% throughout the pregnancy, and the plasma volume increase is much more in the second and the third trimester, and this increase in plasma volume exceeds that of the increase in the red cell mass, and the red cell mass increase is about 25%. That is why there's relative increase in the plasma volume resulting in the hemodilation. That is why this is the anemia occurs, and this is called as physiological anemia of pregnancy. Now, what are the causes of anemia? Cause of anemia can be defined in very many ways, and one of the classification, or you can say these can be inherited or acquired ones. The other approach would be a mechanistic approach where we can see that there's decreased red cell production, or there's increased red cell destruction, or the blood loss. The anemia occurs because of the blood loss. So if you see the acquired cause of anemia, the deficiency anemias, this group generally has the deficiency anemia, deficiency of iron, vitamin B12 or folic acid, or there could be hemorrhagic anemia where the hemorrhage is occurring and there's relative deficiency of the substrate. It may occur in the anemia of chronic disease, acquired hemolytic anemia, and aplastic anemia. Inherited ones could be thalassemias, sickle cell anemia, hemoglobinopathies other than sickle cell anemias, inherited hemolytic anemias. Now, if you define anemia when there's decreased red cell production, like iron deficiency anemia or anemia associated with vitamin B12 deficiency anemia. Iron deficiency anemia is the most common cause of anemia in our country, as well as most of the time, 80% of the time, it is the iron deficiency anemia which is the cause of anemia. And anemia associated with bone marrow disorders. There could be an anemia which is associated with bone marrow suppression, or low levels of erythropoietin, or anemia associated with hypothyroidism. Other could be increased red cell destruction. When the production is there, but the RBCs are getting destroyed. It may occur in cases of inherited hemolytic anemias like sickle cell anemia, thalassemia major, hereditary spherocytosis, or the acquired hemolytic anemias could be autoimmune hemolytic anemia associated with thrombocytopenic purpura, or hemolytic anemia associated with hemolytic uremic syndrome, or hemolytic anemia associated with malaria. And the other cause could be a hemorrhagic anemia. Now, if we define anemia by the size of the RBCs, like by the mean corpuscular volume, if the picture is a microcytic ones, where the RBC size is decreased, they become microcytes, where the volume is less than, MCV is less than 80 femtoliter. And in this category, we find that the causes could be iron deficiency anemia, thalassemias, anemia of chronic disease, sideroblastic anemia associated with copper deficiency, or anemia associated with lead poisoning. The other ones could be a normocytic. And this category, we found that the anemia of hemorrhagic anemia, early iron deficiency anemia, can also present like a normocytic picture, and later on they become microcytic and hypochromic picture. Anemia of chronic disease, bone marrow suppression, or with chronic renal insufficiency, endocrine dysfunction, autoimmune hemolytic anemias, anemia associated with hypothyroidism or hypopituitarism also can present with a normocytic anemia, hereditary spherocytosis, or hemolytic anemia associated with paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. The other category could be a macrocytic anemia, where the MCV is greater than 100 femtoliters. And in this category, we find that very important causes of folic acid deficiency, or anemia associated with vitamin B12 deficiency. The other causes could be a drug-induced hemolytic anemia, or anemia associated with reticulocytosis, or with liver disease, ethanol abuse, or acute myelodysplastic syndrome. These are the rarer ones. So what are the symptoms of anemia? How do you identify that the patient is having a anemia? So if you find that during pregnancy, the symptoms could be subtle ones in the beginning, where they can become highly symptomatic later on. So these go unnoticed in the beginning. It's very important to find out. That is why the screening of anemia is very important during pregnancy, because once they become obvious, the symptom become obvious, the patient has already had gone into a moderate to severe anemia kind of picture. So very important to know what are the symptoms, like weakness. The patient may present with a weakness or fatigue, dizziness, shortness of breath, rapid or irregular heartbeat, pale skin, lips, nails, and there may be a difficulty in concentrating. The other finding could be restless leg syndrome during pregnancy, and a pica, a condition where the patient, the person is eating a non-food items such as gypsum chalk, soil, ice, or paper. So these could be other symptoms. Maybe the patient may be presenting during pregnancy. When the anemia gets worsened and it gets into a severe category, then the patient may present with the tachycardia, hypotension, even congestive cardiac failure can occur in severe cases. So why are we worried that because of anemia? So anemia can lead to many complications in pregnancy, and you will see that it can lead to preterm delivery, low birth weight babies. The baby or the mother gets more prone to infections, and so that is why there is a high increase in the perinatal mortality. If you see the postpartum anemia, the patient may not be may have a good quality of life. There may be lethargy, tiredness, breathlessness, palpitations, and she may be more prone to infections. There may be subinvolution of the uterus, or the lactation part also can suffer. And so these kind of women, the studies have shown that these kind of women have postpartum anemia. Women in the postpartum anemia may also experience greater stress and depression, and so there may be a decrease in the quality of life, you can say. in the postpartum period. And the newborn may be born with deficient iron stores, and there may be a mental. The studies, although not proven, they have shown that there may be some kind of intellectual or a cognitive impairment also in the babies. So basically, we are more concentrating on iron deficiency anemia and megaloblastic anemia because of vitamin B12 and folate deficiency. So per se, iron deficiency anemia is a very common cause. So that is why how can we identify that it's a iron deficiency anemia? The ACOG guidelines says that if you see that if there's increase in the hemoglobin concentration more than 1 gram per deciliter after iron treatment, or if there's absence of bone marrow iron stores as determined by bone marrow iron smear, that means the person is having a iron deficiency anemia. So how does it occur? How does it progress? You can say that spectrum of iron deficiency anemia, they may range from iron depletion when the iron is getting depleted or it's less, and it's basically affect the stored. So the stored iron is also becomes that also becomes low, and that leading to deficiency or the defective erythropoiesis. So the erythropoiesis is not occurring, so RBC count or the hemoglobin formation is not occurring. And when both the stored as well as the transport iron are low, then it lead to a iron deficiency anemia. So the first, and when stored, transport and functional iron low, so that is the state at that time would be the patient would be presenting with iron deficiency anemia. So first of all, the stored gets depleted, so the iron gets consumed during the time the stores are being used first. So what are the normal iron indices in pregnancy? It is said that the plasma iron level during pregnancy 40 to 175 microgram per deciliter. TIBC is roughly 216 to 400 micrograms per deciliter. Transferrin saturation is up to 16 to 60%. Ferritin level is more than 10 microgram per deciliter, and free erythrocyte protoporphyrin level is less than 3 microgram per gram. Now, whenever a patient is presenting with anemia, so you have to first find out that what is the cause of anemia. The anemia, the causes could be various. So a good history and a good clinical examination, you can easily reach to a conclusion that the person is having deficiency anemia, or a woman is having a other cause of anemia. So first is very important is the history. So what are the symptoms of the patient's presenting? So you have to find out that the severity is less or it's more. It's tiredness, lethargy, or palpitations, chest pain, or some kind of in severe cases you can find a tachycardia and congestive cardiac failure also in severe cases. So one has to evaluate a history. Then by the history you have to rule out either it is a deficiency anemia, the picture is because of the anemia or something else, that you have to rule out. And first, before that, you have to rule out that what are the other causes of anemia. Like anemia could be because of the deficient erythropoiesis or because of the increased blood loss. So you have to rule out conditions which can lead to blood loss. Like very important condition in during pregnancy is the hemorrhoids. So you have to take a history of bleeding from any other sides, like bleeding per rectum, or if the patient is having some kind of UTI, recurrent UTI, urinary tract infection, that history has to be taken. So any other like if the patient was already anemic when she conceived, and that the deficiency has become worsened. So in that condition, you have to find out the history of any menorrhagia or any bleeding disorder, So that kind of history you have to take in detail from the patient. And you have to take out the history that if she is breathless, then what are the other causes of breathlessness, like respiratory cause, a cardiac cause. So that way you have to take a detailed history first to find out what is the cause of anemia, rule out the cause of anemia, hemolytic anemias. Hemolytic anemias, the patient would present with recurrent jaundice. Whenever there's a crisis is occurring, that gets precipitated. That kind of history, any family history of anemia, any family history of thalassemias, history of blood transfusions. So all such history has to be taken in detail and to reach a conclusion. And apart from the symptoms which the patient is presenting, so every symptom has to be taken in detail. You have to consider that a symptom, that you have to rule out that symptom, like breathlessness, you have to rule out other cause of breathlessness. So if the patient is having breathlessness, you have to rule out respiratory cause, a cardiac cause. If the patient is present with a swelling of the lower limbs, so that hypoproteinemia could be one cause. So that way you have to evaluate a history. If the patient is present with a generalized NSRQ, you have to rule out other causes, cardiac cause, a renal cause. So that way, a good history is definitely of help in, uh, and reaching to a diagnosis in cases of anemia. So, and apart from the history, then you have to come for the clinical examination. On clinical examination, one has to look for the pallor in all the sites like lower palpebral conjunctiva, dorsum of the tongue. You may find the nail beds are pale. If the patient is severely anemic, the palm and the balm also become pale. So this is how the clinical examination of anemia will be done. You have to rule out jaundice if the patient is not suffering from any kind of hemolytic anemia. Then the other important thing, thyroid is a very important part. There should not be any thyromegaly. Then you have to chest examination, kind of infection of cardiac cause, or a murmur has to be looked for. So this is how you are ruling out everything. No? And then on para-abdominal examination, apart from the obstetrical examination, one has to look for any kind of liver or spleen enlargement, like in case of chronic infections, malaria. So hepatosplenomegaly has to be ruled out. It's difficult to palpate in a term patient, but one has to look for if there's obvious hepatosplenomegaly, then one may find. And any kind of free fluid in the abdominal cavity. So that kind of, the work of the patient is to be done. The first is history and clinical examination, where you can at least make out that what is the patient being suffering from, and then you start investigating. So when you do a blood, what should be the blood picture of cases of anemia? So whenever a patient is presenting, we don't know the cause of anemia. We send a hemogram, which includes hemoglobin, TLC, DLC, peripheral smear, platelet count. So hemoglobin will tell how much is the deficiency of the hemoglobin, basically, whether it is in the mild, moderate, and severe category. Mild is 10 to 11, moderate is 7 to 10, 9.9, and then severe is less than 7. And there's a very severe category also in the ICMR, which is less than 4 gram percent. So in the peripheral smear, one should look for the size of the RBC, like whether there's a normocytic picture, microcytic picture, or a macrocytic picture. There's anisocytosis in case of iron deficiency anemias or any kind of anemia. There will be anisocytosis and poikilocytosis. Typical picture of this is a typical picture of iron deficiency anemia, where there's microcytic hypochromasia, anisocytosis, and poikilocytosis. Then in macrocytic anemia or megaloblastic anemia, you may find hypersegmented neutrophils, which is a characteristic picture of a macrocytic anemia. So these things has to be looked for. Then in cases of like other cause of anemia, like malaria, so one has to look for malaria parasite also in the blood picture in the peripheral smear of the patient. So this is how basically you have to rule out target cells. One has to put target cells may be present in cases of thalassemia also and iron deficiency anemia. But from the peripheral smear, you can easily make out that what kind of picture is there. If it is a microcytic hypochromic picture, then you are very sure it is iron deficiency anemia, or it could be thalassemia. Then you have to differentiate between the two. So this is how you reach to a diagnosis. Then platelet count may be normal. In pregnancy also some kind of 15% fall in the platelet count occurs, but it lies in the normal range. Then very important finding is that when you do the iron indices, the hemoglobin indices like MCV, MCH, MCHC, in microcytic picture there will be decrease in the MCV. In iron deficiency anemia, there will be decrease in the MCV, MCH, and MCHC may be normal. So, but a very important DD in microcytic, if you are getting a microcytic picture, is a thalassemia. So one has to differentiate from thalassemia. An important index, a Menzer index, can be calculated from the indices, which is MCV over RBC count. If this index is more than 13, then the patient is having a iron deficiency anemia, or else or if it is less than 13, then you are dealing with the case of thalassemia. Yeah, the other important thing we can do is a thyroid function test, which will tell you the thyroid status. Then LFT can be done. The LFT KFT is not to be done in a routinely in cases. So first and foremost is the hemogram. You send a hemogram and then you will reach your conclusion. The other, the parathyroid function test is generally we are doing in every kind of patient. LFT KFT, they are not to be done if you are suspecting some kind of liver disorder, chronic disease. If you are suspecting a chronic kidney disease, then you may have to send a LFT KFT. Otherwise, for initial workup of a patient of anemia, it may not be required. Urinarum and urine culture are a routine part of our OPS examination, and urinarum will tell you if the patient is having any kind of infection, and culture will tell you any kind of asymptomatic bacteriuria also. Stool for ovocyst has to be done. The other investigation which may, if you are not if you are not reaching to a conclusion, then the other investigation could be ultrasound abdomen, which can be done for a liver, spleen, or any other kind of enlargement, or any free fluid in the abdominal cavity. So that way, these are the other tests. But the basic test which helps in the diagnosis is the blood picture. Once you have done investigations and you are treating a patient, and then you are she's not responding to your treatment basically, no. So the other would be that you can send other tests. If suppose the patient is having a blood picture of a megaloblastic anemia, macrocytic anemia, no? So the levels of vitamin B12 and folic acid can be done, but it may not be required for the diagnosis. So once we start treating the patient and see the response. So for the initial starting of treatment, in case of megaloblastic anemia, red cell folate or the vitamin B12 serum folate levels and the vitamin B12 assays are not required. So how do you differentiate between the three conditions like iron deficiency anemia, thalassemia, and anemia of chronic disease? In iron deficiency anemia, the iron levels would be less. In thalassemia, they would be normal. And in anemia of chronic disease, they'll be decreased. Because these three conditions may be confusing. That is why we have taken three of them, and then we're trying to differentiate between the three. The total iron binding capacity is increased in case of iron deficiency anemia. It is normal in case of thalassemia, and it is decreased in cases of anemia of chronic disease. Ferritin level, which shows the stores, are decreased in iron deficiency anemia. They are normal in case of thalassemia, and they are increased in cases of anemia of chronic disease. Iron to total iron binding capacity is less than 18%, and it is less than 18% in case of iron deficiency anemia. Thalassemia, it is normal, and it is more than 18% in case of anemia of chronic disease. So what are the causes of macrocytic anemia and how does it present? Macrocytic anemia may be a megaloblastic or a non-megaloblastic picture, and causes of megaloblastic anemia are folic acid deficiency, vitamin B12 deficiency, and pernicious anemia. Now, the conditions which can give rise to a non-megaloblastic anemia are the alcoholism, liver disease, myelodysplasia, aplastic anemia, hypothyroidism, and increased reticulocyte count. So, hypothyroidism can present in very many ways. Can show a normocytic to macrocytic picture also. A macrocytic anemia is characterized by a MCV which is greater than 100 femtoliters, and if you find the MCV values of more than 115 femtoliter, it is almost exclusively seen in patients with the folic acid or vitamin B12 deficiencies. So what are the confirmatory tests? The confirmatory test would be a serum folic acid or vitamin B12 levels, and measurement of red cell folate assays has also been, it's also one of the tests which can be done. So regarding the treatment of these anemias, treatment of iron deficiency anemia, very important that what do we do? Once you have diagnosed that the patient may be having iron deficiency anemia. So from the blood picture only you start giving a oral iron to the patient. So you call the patient after 2 weeks and to check whether there's any rise in the hemoglobin in the blood or not. So this is how you are basically, you are not investigating, you are not doing the serum iron level or a ferritin levels. You're basically giving oral iron in the beginning when the patient is presenting with your anemia, and then after 2 weeks you have to check whether there's rise in the hemoglobin or not. Side by side or parallel to that, you have to check the compliance of the patient also. So if the compliance is good and the patient is sustaining or taking oral iron and she has no problems, and there should be rise in the hemoglobin levels after 2 weeks. So this is how basically you are giving a trial of oral iron. Suppose if she is not responding to your oral iron, then you have to think of other causes, or you have to see, you can order investigations like ferritin levels, or rule out any other condition like hemoglobinopathies why she is not responding to your iron, right? Thalassemia screening is generally done in all cases in all primary gravida in our institute. So, how do we identify what are the protocols for basically treating or managing these anemia during pregnancy? All pregnant women, they are screened for anemia in the first booking itself. So, whenever the patient is presenting, even in the first trimester, she is screened for hemoglobin, and again the screening is done at 28 weeks. But if there's any other condition like women with multiple pregnancies, they should also have a full blood count at 20 to 24 weeks, because these are the women who are more prone to develop anemias. So how we treat anemia? So whenever a patient presenting with you with anemia, suppose she is presenting with a mild to moderate anemia in any trimester of pregnancy, like not in the first trimester. In the first trimester, we are not prescribing any oral iron to the patient. From second trimester onwards, we are giving oral iron to the patient. So you start giving oral iron to the patient as a first line therapy. Then, if the patient is not responding to your oral iron, then you think of other options, like you have a option of parenteral iron. But how should you give oral iron? So basically, oral iron, you can ask the patient to take if she is anemic. Then you have to give the dose, and the dose could be 100 to 200 milligram of elemental iron, right? So elemental iron 100 to 200 milligram can be given in a patient, and you have to check the compliance. Then what should you advise the patient while prescribing iron? First of all, the iron should be taken. The best absorption would be that she takes the iron before meals, 1 hour before meal, and see, whether the patient is developing any gastritis or gastric intolerance like constipation or diarrhea, any other thing, or vomiting, nausea. So that kind of thing is to be checked. So ideal is that she start taking the oral iron before meals, and if she does not have any kind of problem, then she can continue. If suppose the patient develops any kind of gastritis or constipation, diarrhea, or any other disturbances, then she can take the patient iron after meals. You have to ask the patient. You can ask the patient to take with the lime juice. She should stop. She should not take the calcium tablet along with the iron tablet. So it's very, very important, because many of the women are not being told that they don't have to take the iron and calcium together, and they take the iron and calcium together, and despite all that she's been taking iron for months together, but she has no improvement in the hemoglobin. So this is a very important point, that she should not take iron and calcium together. There should be a gap of at least 2 to 3 years in the iron or the calcium tablets. So whenever you start prescribing from a lower dose, so that she can sustain that dose, and then you can go to a higher level. If she suppose is not tolerating oral iron, the other option could be that, not in a therapeutic form, but suppose you are giving a prophylactic iron, then you can ask the patient to take it in an alternate day. So, just to have a good compliance. After all these, if the patient is still not tolerating, then you can switch over to the other forms of iron like the parenteral iron. So parenteral iron is given because the rate of rise of hemoglobin in oral iron as well as parenteral iron is same. So that is why it hardly makes a difference that whether you are giving a oral iron or a parenteral iron. But in the parenteral iron, the advantage is the stores will also get replenished. So when the patient is not tolerating, the compliance is poor, or when she is in she's approaching term, whenever you do not have time for these oral iron to act, or the hemoglobin, because you cannot just sit over the patient. You don't have time when the patient is near term, and she is about to deliver and say in 4 to 6 weeks. So you cannot just sit over the patient and say that, I'll just check the whether she responds to oral iron. You don't have time. So in that case also, one can prescribe oral parenteral iron rather than oral iron. Now, what are the other things which we are basically focusing cases of if the patient is having anemia in pregnancy? Uh, First thing is that the antenatal checkup of all the patients. There should be a proper antenatal care during the pregnancy. So whenever the patient is, whether she is going to a primary health center or a district level hospital or a tertiary level hospital, wherever she's going, or she's going to a dispensary, proper screening of anemia is to be done. She has to follow and the instructions. She has to take the iron as prescribed by the health center or by the doctors. So the compliance of the iron is to be taken. And again, she does not develop anemia. Suppose the patient develops anemia during pregnancy, has to be treated. Suppose she is not treated, she is not responding to her treatment, then she can be referred to a higher level center. So this is how these at what level the referral is to be done. Suppose she is being treated in a dispensary and she is not responding to oral iron therapy, or he requires blood transfusion, that patient has to be referred to a higher level, or secondary, or a district level, or a tertiary center where she can be taken care of. Then near-term patient is to be screened for anemia. Again, you have to check their hemoglobin, that what is the hemoglobin, and then you are preparing the patient for a delivery. When the patient has come into labor, or the patient is going into labor, active management of the third stage of labor is recommended to minimize the blood loss. This is what we are doing in every patient. But suppose the patient is having some kind of other condition, like the at high risk of hemorrhage, like multiparity, over-distended uterus. So these are the patients like placenta previa, where the patient has to be operated, previous cesarean section or previous 2 cesarean section, where the third cesarean would also be an elective cesarean. So these kind of patients, they have to have a hemoglobin cutoff at least 10 gram per cent at the time of delivery. So in a primary gravida, you can still think of the patients coming with 8 gram of hemoglobin. You can still leave the patient and arrange blood simultaneously and prepare her for delivery, because you do not have time for blood transfusion. But in primary gravida, you can still leave, because provided there are no other condition which is a high risk of of higher blood loss. But in cases of previous 2 cesarean sections, placenta previa, multiparity, or grand multipara, you can say, multiple pregnancy, like twin delivery. So these are the patients who are at high risk of hemorrhage. So in such a patient, they have to deliver in a higher center first, and then you have to basically keep their hemoglobin at least 10 gram per cent at the time of delivery, by any means, by either parenteral iron or with a blood transfusion. If you do not have, suppose you have only 1 week left for such patient to deliver, so in that case you have to do a blood transfusion so that the hemoglobin is at least 10 gram per cent, they are anemic, right? So this is how you can just categorize the patient and treat them. Now, what is the recommended daily intake of iron? If the recommended daily intake of iron for the latter half pregnancy is around 30 milligrams on day. Basically, the total iron requirement during pregnancy is around 1000 milligram, and it is higher in the second and the third trimester. In the third trimester, the daily requirement would be around 6 milligram per 6 milligram per day. In the first trimester, it would be around 1 to 2 milligram, 3 to 4 milligram in second trimester. So this is how the requirement of iron increases during pregnancy. We all know that around 10 to 15% of the oral iron is absorbed. So accordingly, you have to see that how much of the iron is required in a. Basically, you have to individualize, and what kind of the diet she's taking. Either she's taking a non-vegetarian diet or a vegetarian diet, because a non-heme iron is poorly absorbed than a heme iron. So iron which is present in the red meat, fish, and poultry, that is a heme iron. and this is better absorbed. So whether the patient is taking a vegetarian diet or a non-vegetarian diet, and how much the iron she's getting from the diet, that you have to individualize in every case. So this is how you can calculate the total iron requirement of that lady. So every woman should be counseled. All women should be counseled regarding diet in the pregnancy, and she should be explained about the iron-rich food sources and cheap sources. I mean, the green leafy vegetables, the jaggery, the chana and everything. She has to be explained that what are the sources, how should we take it. She should not take tea or coffee along with the foods, because tea, the calcium, everything, they hinders with the iron absorption. And so these are the factors. I mean, you have to, counsel the patient about the diet, that how she should take, what all things she should include in her diet, and what are the good sources of iron. Like cooking in iron utensils, a very good source of iron. So this is how you have to counsel the patient. So for the treatment, you have to prescribe 100 to 200 milligram of elemental iron per day. This is the maximum dose you can prescribe the patient. And we have various salts, but the ferrous salts, they are better absorbed because the iron is absorbed in the ferrous salt only. So ferric salts are much less absorbed, and they have to be reduced to ferrous form with the reducing agents, and then they can be absorbed. So these are the cases where iron deficiency anemia is there. Suppose a patient with a hemoglobinopathy comes to you, and she develops anemia. So how will you say that this patient is, she requires the prescription of iron? Does she need iron or not in such a case? Because in hemoglobinopathies, the defect is something else. The defect is not in the iron deficiency, it is something else. But they can also develop iron deficiency anemia. So in such a case, iron should be prescribed, or should be given a therapeutic iron if the ferritin stores are less than 30 microgram per liter. So in cases of hemoglobinopathy, one has to check the ferritin levels to prescribe iron. And these are the preparations where this is given if it is a ferrous fumarate tablet that contains 106 milligram of elemental iron. Ferrous sulfate contains 65 milligram elemental iron. Ferrous gluconate contains 34 milligram. Iron dextran is a parental form of iron which it comes in 50 milligram elemental iron per ml and can be given IM or IV. Iron ferric gluconate is another preparation which can be given through parenteral route, and iron sucrose. Iron sucrose is a good form of iron which we are giving during pregnancy in the parenteral form. Now, what is the parenteral iron therapy? Parenteral iron therapy is indicated with this absolute non-compliance we have already discussed. So the preparations which are available are iron sucrose, iron carboxymaltose, and iron maltoside. Iron sucrose is the most common form which we are prescribing. Iron carboxymaltose is not still US FDA approved, but still their trials have shown that the side effects are less, and it can be given during pregnancy in the second and the third trimester. And the parenteral form of iron is not to be given, any iron is not given in the first trimester. What are the contraindications of parenteral iron therapies? If there's any history of anaphylaxis or reactions to parenteral iron therapy in the first trimester of pregnancy, or if there's any acute or active infection or a chronic infection, one should avoid giving parenteral iron therapy, or in case of chronic liver disease. This is a ferric carboxymaltose. It also comes in the vial form, and the advantage we'll just discuss. So the parenteral iron therapy can be given from the second trimester onwards and can be given the postpartum period also. The patients who are not responding or who are intolerant to oral iron. And the dose of the parenteral iron can be calculated on the basis of the pre-pregnancy weight for a target of HP of 11 gram %. So which form is to be given? Which is the form, whether is to be given in the parenteral form? It depends on the local facility and the availability of the iron. In our institute, we are giving iron sucrose very well, and it has got least side effects. So the other preparations are iron sucrose, and iron carboxymaltose. Iron sucrose, we all know that is to be given and can be given in a 200 milligram in a normal saline, and 100 ml of normal saline you can give up to 200 milligram of elemental iron at one point of time, and then it is to be given at the rate of initially slowly, so that you can check the if the patient is developing any kind of allergic reaction. So any reaction can occur, so the the doctor has to be prepared for any kind of severe or acute reaction which can occur, so that the trolley, the availability of the other drugs which has to be used in cases of allergic reaction, like it is adrenaline, any kind of resuscitation, the measures which are used to resuscitate the patient has to be ready. So basically, your trolley is to be ready for any kind of reaction. When you start iron sucrose, you have to start in a suppose 1 ml per minute in the initial say 3 to 5 minutes, so that you can look for any kind of reactions. If there are no reactions in the initial phase, then you can give it fast, and the whole of the bottle or 100 ml of normal saline is to go in at around 20 to 25 minutes, right? And it's to be given, the maximum dose can be given thrice a week, and say 200, if you're giving a 200 milligram, so you can maximum you can give it 600 milligram in per week. Iron carboxymaltose is a ferric hydroxide carbohydrate complex. It has to be administered intravenously. The advantage of this is that you can give a single dose of 1000 milligram over 15 minutes, and the dose is to be calculated 15 milligram per kg by injection or 20 milligram per kg by infusion. So the advantage is that you are giving a large amount at one in a single dose. So multiple infusions are not required. Although it is not USFDA approved, but it is still used in. We are using this during the postpartum period as well as in the second and third trimester. The other form is a iron isomaltoside. This is also intravenous preparations, and it can also be given. So the advantage of parenteral iron that it replenishes the stores also. When we see the intramuscular preparations, we have one is the iron dextran preparations. Iron dextran, because of this, when the new preparations, iron sucrose and carboxymaltose have come, so the use of iron dextran has decreased a lot. The side effects were more. The major side effects was of these preparations were they were painful, and there used to be staining at the time of at the site of injection. So they were used with the Z technique, where the staining is avoided, and the risk of reactions with these preparations were high. So that is why it has gone into that we are not using now. I mean, it's very less frequently used, you can say. So more of the iron sucrose and the iron carboxymaltose is used. So we have already discussed that whenever a patient is delivering, a pregnant woman with anemia is delivering, then one has to look for any kind of that the patient does not bleed much. You have to take care that do active management of third stage of labor to decrease the peripartum blood loss or postpartum blood loss. The intramuscular symptometry and syntocinon can be given if there's history of prolonged labor or any kind of instrumental delivery. Suppose you do not have a symptometry or syntocinon, then the other option would be a misoprostol, which does not require any kind of strict storage conditions. And if suppose in cases of peripheral hospital, where in cases of dispensary or a primary health center where syntocinon facility or symptometry storage facility is not there, then misoprostol is a good option at these centers. So one can use misoprostol also as a prophylactic measure. Now, suppose a patient is coming to you in any kind of trimester and you find that the patient is severely anemic. So what do you do in such cases? In such a case, the patient should be given a blood transfusion. So the indication of blood transfusion, the patient is having severe anemia in any trimester. If the patient has already gone to congestive cardiac failure because of anemia, then you have to give blood to the patient to increase the oxygen carrying capacity of the patient immediately. And also in cases of moderate to severe anemia in term pregnancy, suppose you find a patient of 36 weeks and she's coming with a 6.5 gram of hemoglobin. So you do not have time for her, uh, increase the hemoglobin because she's term pregnancy. So give her blood, and then you can put the patient. Suppose she's 8 grams, then you can put the patient either on oral therapy or on the parenteral iron therapy, depending on the tolerance of the oral iron or depending on the compliance of the patient. So this is how these are the use of blood transfusion. Then, if we see the megaloblastic anemia, uh, suppose you get a megaloblastic picture in the blood picture, then how do we treat? The history would be that there will be these patients may have developed megaloblastic anemia because of poor dietary intake or alcohol abuse. So you have to take a history of alcohol abuse. You can say should take a complete dietary history in cases of anemic patients so that you can know whether it's a nutrition deficiency or something else. Any substance abuse has to be seen in patient of anemia. Any family history of pernicious anemia has to be known. And again, history of gastric bypass surgery can also lead to vitamin B12 deficiency. See, all these conditions, all these history has to be taken in detail to reach to a diagnosis. Then again, if you find a megaloblastic anemia picture, then you can do a serum levels of vitamin B12 to have a diagnosis of vitamin B12 deficiency. And generally, the level would be less than 100 picogram per ml in case of vitamin B12 deficiency. Then one can also check the serum folate levels. In case of folate deficiency, you will find that serum folate levels are less than 2 nanogram per ml, and the red cell folate levels are less than 150 nanogram per ml, which is deficiency. Now, very important part is what are the preventive measures which is to be taken in anemia and pregnancy. In our society, in Indian society, you can say the commonest cause of anemia is a nutritional deficiency. So basically, the nutrition is one part which is to be the counseling for the improvement of nutrition during pregnancy is to be done. So antenatal care includes all such. This is a package basically where you are giving prophylactic iron to the patient, you are screening for iron, you are basically doing a counseling for dietary advice. So a good antenatal care is a must, you can say, to prevent anemia in pregnancy. Anemia Mukt Bharat is a strategy of Government of India, which has included that all the pregnant women to be dewormed in the second trimester with the albendazole or the mebendazole, and screening of anemia has to be done. And the dose, suppose the patient is having a deficiency anemia, iron deficiency anemia, she delivers. So the in the postpartum period also she has to take the oral iron for 6 months to replenish the stores. So what we would say the 100 days, now it is increased to 6 months. 180 days, basically, she has to be given iron. Then dietary advice, deworming, these are all the parts of the antenatal care, but we are basically focusing on these. And postpartum care also, a nutritional advice in the postpartum period, she has to take in the postpartum period also, she has to take iron to replenish the stores. And again, a good contraception counseling is to be done. Suppose a patient is coming to antenatal care, one has to give a counseling for the contraception, because what is the method which is she is going to use in the postpartum period. So that counseling has to be done in the antenatal period also during the antenatal visits. So good contraception counseling to decrease to basically the number of has to be reduced, and she does not have to go and abort or do an MTP for those kind of unwanted pregnancies. And adequate spacing between the pregnancy is must to decrease this incidence of or the prevalence of anemia in pregnancy. Treatment of megaloblastic anemia, we've skipped. The folic acid deficiency requires at least 1 milligram of folic acid per day. And the treatment, because folic acid deficiency, it can be treated by oral route, but if it is a vitamin B12 deficiency, it has to be given in the parenteral form. So there are various kinds of regime which can be given for treating a vitamin B12 deficiency during pregnancy. The one would be that you get 1000 microgram parenteral cyanocobalamin every week for 6 weeks, and this is followed by 1000 microgram intramuscularly injections every month till you treat. And the response, you can see that there's increase in ferritic count is in any form of, if you're treating iron deficiency anemia, the best measure to see whether the patient is responding to your oral iron is to see the retic count. So the retic count will start increasing in the 5 to 7 days, and normally it is 0.2%. It will rise to 2 to 5 or 6%. So increasing the retic count is one good measure which can tell you that she is responding to your oral iron, as well as your the treatment of megaloblastic anemia. And also, if you see in megaloblastic anemia, the hypersegmented neutrophils, which are characteristic of this megaloblastic anemia, that disappears in around 2 to 3 weeks. So this is how you see the response in cases of megaloblastic anemia. So this is all. And if you have any queries, you can ask. So everything is clear to you in anemia? If you have any queries, 2 3 minutes are left, you can ask. Are you having another lecture at 9 o'clock?